Welcome to Tuesday Teaching Tips.
Hey everyone, Asalamualaykum, and welcome to another very long overdue video for Tuesday Teaching Tips. This is Hafsa here at mamateachesme.com. If you've joined us for the first time, we do have a number of teaching tips videos over on the blog, so do look out for that as well. Today I'm going to be sharing something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, but before doing so I wanted to sort of test it out on my kids and see how it would work for us. So we are going to be looking at teaching Islamic studies for kids. Now the first question you're probably wondering is, where do I actually start when it comes to Islamic studies, and especially teaching children as young as 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, even 3-year-olds? Like, where do you actually start? So we've been homeschooling from the start, so my children haven't been to school. So I'm going to share with you how I started introducing them to Islam, what sort of books we've been looking at, and what sort of projects we're now currently doing after about 2 to 3 years of homeschooling. Quite naturally, the first place to start is actually in your home. You as a mum or a parent will be thinking about your children's Islamic education from a very young age, and therefore aiming to create an Islamic environment at home. You could do so by purchasing like the Fajr clock, the one that plays the adhan in the house. You could ensure that your kids are watching you as you're praying and things like that. So the very obvious ones, because at the end of the day you are your role models for your kids. The next most important thing I would say is actually thinking about purchasing some Islamic children's books. There is a really nice range now, especially with the hardback books by an upcoming author, Sharina Rahman, also a relative of mine. But the books are absolutely amazing. They're really simple ways for children to learn key Islamic phrases like Asalamualaykum and Alhamdulillah. There's also this really lovely book, Allah Knows All About Me by Learning Roots, and then The Way to Jannah as well. So that's one of the ways you can start at home. Now we all know kids learn so much more through experience and through being a part of something. So celebration of Eid or Ramadan or going to the masjid is just an important experience for them. So I know it can be difficult taking kids to the masjid at times, but try your best to immerse them in that environment so they can have Islam instilled within them from a very young age. I think this was one of the first books I brought. It's Dawood Warnsby's Nasheed's Colours of Islam. I think there were some really nice songs that we would listen to and try to sing along, and this is something that we really enjoyed for the kids when they were really young, so I'd say when they're like 2 to 3-year-olds. Some other really great ideas are to have the daily du'as around the house. So yes, your child might be young, but it actually might be a reminder for you to remember and remind yourselves and your kids, what do we say before we're eating, and what do we say after we've finished, and what's a good dua that we should say in the morning, and what's one for the evening, and so on. And this is one of the ways that I've practiced duas a lot with my kids. So now, mashallah, they know duas for when we get into the car, and one of them, well, both of them always want to lead it, but one of them leads it and the rest of us follow. They remember duas for leaving the house, and all of this is done through by you. This is done by you practicing with your children and reminding them, and slowly they pick it up and they've memorized them just like that, because it's become part of your daily routine. And then of course one of the most obvious ones is teaching your children the shahada, the kalima. And this was actually something that I left to my dad, because he absolutely loves singing to the kids and continuously reciting La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah until they actually get it. So alhamdulillah, that was something that my dad taught my kids. As your children get older, you might start wondering, well, okay, now what? Where do I go with teaching them Islam? I need to also teach them Quran, I need to teach them Arabic, and that's absolutely fine. So for you, I have separate blog posts on teaching Quran, and there's lots of tips on how to get started with teaching Quran at home. This obviously applies to children who are now sort of even between 3 and 5. And Arabic, there's some great things out there online that you can now purchase, including these Fondo Arabic letters. I think this is by the Desi Doll Company. And for your older learners, My First Quran with Pictures by Shireen Sharif. So really good resources now available to us. So if you're looking for more on Quran and Arabic, I will put it in the links below so you can have a look at my blog posts from then. Speaking of Quran, this is one of our absolute favorite books that we purchased for the kids when they were memorizing and looking at the story of the elephant, which is Surah Fil. I absolutely love this book. If I just show you, if you're not sure about it, this is actually a pop-up book written now by one of my really good friends, and it's just such a lovely book. The kids absolutely loved it. They loved the story. They found it all the more easier memorizing Surah Fil because of it. Okay, now you're probably wondering, when do you actually start? So we didn't really start at the beginning of the year or anything like that. We started in Ramadan. That was when I first officially thought, right, now it's time to teach my kids a little bit more about Islam. And what better month to start in than Ramadan? We have the whole month dedicated to fasting, and every day we practiced a good deed, and we had a calendar, and there were loads of activities. And I've got a lovely post on Ramadan if you want to see that, and I'll put it in the link below too. But otherwise, these are some of the books that we really enjoyed: Ramadan Around the World and Ramadan Moon, Going to Mecca, and Yan's Hajj. Now for ourselves, Alhamdulillah, we managed to complete the Hajj I think a year or two ago, and that really intrigued my kids and they wanted to know so much more. So we left learning about Hajj until then, because to be honest, I don't really know much about it, except it's a pilgrimage, and it's only once I experienced it I really got to understand it. So it was a lot easier for me to teach the kids. Otherwise, they did understand that there's an Eid with a sacrifice, and we did a lot more about the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Quite typically, I started by teaching my kids the 5 pillars of Islam, and we did it in a very simple way, and we looked at the 5 pillars in a little booklet form, and it was just like a colouring sheet and a sort of brief explanation, and that was enough for their age then. And you know, my eldest was 4 then, and I thought, okay, this is all she really needs to know. But what was missing for me is I didn't have a logical way of teaching about Islam which followed some sort of order. It was kind of all over the place. And yes, I could have purchased a syllabus and tried that way, but for myself, I wanted our homeschool and our plans to be unique to us, and you know, linked to our interests and our love for crafts and things like that. So this is what I ended up doing. It really wasn't until I decided to focus on one aspect of Islam, one project, and what better project than to teach our kids the 99 names of Allah. Now this project was actually inspired by a really lovely sister all the way from Australia. She goes by the account name of Kitab Kids on Instagram. So every time we do our craft related to one of Allah's names to remind us of what his name is about, we actually get inspiration from her account. And my eldest is so proud of the fact that there's another child who's doing the same project or has done the same project. So we always go back to her account. So Jazakallah khair to her for inspiring us to do this. This book that we use is this one, The 99 Names of God, written and illustrated by Daniel Thomas Dyer. So it's a really nice book. It gives you some really thought-provoking questions that you could think about as you go over the names, and you know, to help you understand. And then we choose a craft, sometimes based on the actual book, and sometimes something that reminds of us of Allah, you know, in our daily lives. Project absolute favorite of my kids. We tend to do it once a week, and sometimes if they feel we've missed out, they'll say we want to do 2. So both of them get to do 1 poster each, or they work on 1 together. So these were some of our latest ones that we've done. And then alhamdulillah, another thing that we really enjoy doing is when we come into our room, which is actually our guest room, when we come in here, we literally go through every single name, and then we practice it in the song form. So Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, and so on, until we get to the last name I think we've done is Al-Ghaffar Al-Qahar. That's the one. By the way, this project is perfect to start with 4 or 5-year-olds. It really is about you helping them understand each and every one of the names. We now don't even put the translation of the meaning of the name. For example, in this one, which we really enjoyed, this was the name Al-Khaliq, and we used some of our old flowers that we'd pressed from a year ago. And even when I did this, I did not know which project we were going to use these pressed flowers for. I thought it might be some greeting cards, but the fact that it ended up being on this poster, it really just amazed us. We absolutely loved opening up the flower press to see these flowers pressed just for this poster, for Allah's name, Al-Khaliq. Another project we're focusing on this year in our Islamic studies is Stories of the Prophets. We really enjoyed this book by Zainab Miam. We actually love all her books, but this is absolutely one of our favorites. Migo and Ali Love for the Prophets. The language is so easy. The stories are, detailed enough for the children to grasp. So it starts all the way from Adam, but if I give you the contents page all the way to Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there's a few prophets that aren't in this book, but that's obviously something we can always come back to at a later stage when our children are older. That my kids did after learning about the story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. They were a lot younger then, so I think one was 4 and the other one was like just under 3. And we did some hand printing of some of the animals, and they learned that the animals went onto Prophet Nuh's boat to save themselves from the flood. One of our recent projects that we've just started, I think a good few months ago. This timeline template is from A Muslim Homeschool, and I'm just going to show you how it is. So eventually it's all the prophets in a timeline order. Okay, so we've actually not done them in order, but here we've got Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. So at this point, my eldest Amara is now 5, so she's able to write, alhamdulillah, and she can, with my help, retell parts of the story. And we photocopied in some of the pictures from the actual Migo and Ali book to save us from drawing as well. We really started this project when she was a little bit younger, so I think when she was about 4.5, and this was one of the first ones we did when we looked at the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. So we took one aspect of his story, obviously not being able to do justice to all of it and fit it all onto the same page, and we focused on his dream and what his brothers did, because that was a shock for Amara, that they threw him into a well. But then we looked at the positive and how Allah saved him, and then some people took him out. But we looked at the start of the story, and the dream was the focus, and drawing the stars and the moon and the sun and everything that we heard from his narration of his dream. Another page about Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. So every time we do a prophet story, Amara is very aware of this timeline book because it's all about wanting to complete it. But she's very aware, so we always end up going back to it. That's it for now. That's one of our Islamic Studies projects. Of course, when I haven't been able to find stories, I've made up my own. This is the story of Bilal, which we did recently as part of Black History Month and part of our Stories from Other Cultures unit. And this is actually available on my blog as well, and I'll leave the link below for you guys to have a look at. I hope you found that useful. A quick overview of how you can start teaching Islam to your kids. Like I said, where to start? You start in your home, you start with yourself. And then I've also recommended some children's books, Islamic children's books. I've also spoken about the festivals of Eid and Ramadan. And you can hear the adhan here right now, so I better stop. And I shall see you on another episode of Tuesday Teaching Tips.